Celebrity Justice.
Shit, man. You just ate the most acid I've ever seen anybody eat in my life.
Welcome back to Celebrity Justice. You know, Up in Smoke is not just a movie. It seems to be a way of life for half of Cheech and Chong. Tommy Chong, that is. Seems the cops think he's a real head case for selling bongs and other drug paraphernalia on the internet. He's been charged with a federal crime and faces up to 3 years in the joint. But he may only have to serve a token of that amount after pleading guilty. And then, of course, he would have to shell out some green. Fines, that is. Holly, back to you.
After next week's break. It's expected to replace jail time with small fines for simple possession and crack down on growers and traffickers. But the question for a lot of people today is why the delay? Here's CPAC's Michelle Lavoie.
The federal government announced today it would delay introducing its marijuana legislation. It was supposed to be presented in the House of Commons tomorrow. Justice Minister Cauchon wouldn't say why, just that it was a government decision.
I said here many times that I wanted to proceed as soon as I can. We're talking about a policy. We're talking about, of course, reform in terms of legislation, but as well we're talking about renewing the national drug strategy. There's a lot of stakeholders involved in terms of various department ministries, and of course a lot of discussion took place over the past few months, and I would say over the past few days.
Some of those discussions were held yesterday with his American counterpart. The U.S. is concerned that softer drug policies will mean more drug use in the States. Senator Nolan wonders why the delay.
Well, I'm more concerned with the delay. I understand that the bill will not be tabled and will not be presented in the House tomorrow. It means that details still need to be a little bit worked out.
Minister Cauchon didn't say talks with the U.S. caused the delay. He said he only briefly talked to the Americans about softer marijuana laws.
I didn't get involved into the details at all.
Minister Cauchon says he wants Canadians to understand that even if possession of small amounts of marijuana may be decriminalized, it's still illegal and harmful. Minister of Health Anne McClellan supports decriminalization, but not without a national drug strategy.
The national drug strategy is a large integrated approach that involves health, it involves treatment, information, education. It also involves my colleague, the Solicitor General, on the enforcement side. We have got to shut down illegal grow-ops in this country. They're a huge problem. They fund organized crime. And we just simply have to do a much better job on that side.
McClellan says she is waiting for the government to decide how much it will spend on the national drug strategy. Other Liberals say they just don't want the decriminalization of possession of small amounts of marijuana.
I cannot support it, and specifically being on the border, Niagara Falls definitely has an effect, and we have been forewarned by Ambassador Salucci that, that slow down that border, and that border is not really going that well at the moment, so I don't think we want to add anything to the meeting right now. With the relations with Canada and the United States.
Minister Cauchon says he'll introduce his marijuana bill after Parliament returns from a one-week break. That's after May 26th. And he says the government wants to proceed with the policy before the summer recess. For Primetime Politics, I'm Michelle Lavoie.
So there are many unanswered questions about the marijuana legislation and the timetable for introducing it. For more on that, I'm joined by three members of Parliament. Derek Lee is an Ontario Liberal MP and a member of the Commons Justice Committee. He's in the foyer of the House. Randy White is a Canadian Alliance MP from British Columbia and the party's caucus vice chair and a critic on issues involving the Solicitor General. And Libby Davies is a New Democrat MP from British Columbia and her party's critic on social policy. Welcome to you all. Thanks for being here tonight. Derek Lee, let me start with you, if I can. The marijuana legislation was all set to roll out Thursday. The minister was slated to do a round of interviews here in Ottawa about the new legislation and the what it would do and what it would change. And now it's been delayed for about 2 weeks. What can you tell us about why there's a delay?
Well, I prefer not to call it the marijuana legislation. There's hopefully a lot more to this than just the marijuana piece. Our report, Randy, Libby, and I, and others sat on the special committee, and it's a broad, comprehensive report that involved all facets of Canada's difficulties, the world's difficulties with abuse of non-medical drugs.
Okay, so why, when it was all set to go tomorrow, why is it, where's the delay?
That's the real question.
That's the real question.
Now let's go to the micro question, Peter. I'm not exactly sure why, because I heard the rumors and I was kind of ready for the legislation and the policy statement to come in, but it's not coming. I'm pretty sensitive to what happens in the chamber behind us here, and it may just be that the optics of consulting with our American counterparts either the day before or the day after introducing legislation just looks bad to Canadians. Inevitably, we're going to consult with our American counterparts on almost everything we do cross-border, drug interdiction, etc. So the fact that we consult is not the issue, but the timing of it is important in terms of optics, and I'm relatively content now that or it might have been nicer if Minister Cauchon had talked to John Ashcroft a couple of weeks ago instead of today or yesterday.
Okay, Mr. White, do you think the issue is optics here? That it wouldn't have looked right to bring it in after the day, 2 days after having to brief the Americans before Parliament?
I think the Justice Minister is starting to get the impression that people want to see an overall national drug strategy before they see a small part of very small part, I might add.
And that's the case the health minister was making today, that well, she supports decriminalization. She really needs to know that the drug strategy plan is on.
It's the health minister, or it's the Canadian Medical Association. If you see today, they've come out and said, hey, what's your overall plan? It's the police in Canada. It's a lot of people saying, well, this is just a wee small bit of a very large strategy. We want to see the whole thing. And I think they have a right to see it. And I think the Justice Minister is sensing that, and the government is sensing that, and they're finally trying to put the cues in the right place.
Okay, Libby Davies, what's your view of what has transpired here in the last 24 hours?
You know, Peter, I think the whole thing is just incredibly suspicious. First of all, the minister has had months and months to put together an overall drug strategy. He's had the committee's reports for several months now. So I just find it quite alarming that, you know, he goes down to Washington one day to see Mr. Ashcroft. You know, maybe Mr. Ashcroft wanted some amendments, and the minister now has to come back and run around and put in some amendments. But, you know, I think it's really quite absurd what's going on. And all the indications were that this bill was going to be tabled tomorrow, including some measures around a drug strategy. All of a sudden it's called off when he comes back from Washington. So I think we do have to be suspicious about it. And I think that in this country we have a right to deal with our own legislation. It should be before Parliament. I mean, there's been an issue even about why the minister has been going to Washington when he's about to table a bill, and why there's been so much information available about this bill in the media, and it's not yet been tabled in Parliament. So I think the whole thing has gone awry, and this minister should really be, you know, kind of called up and you know, he is the Minister of Justice. He should be putting this legislation that he's promised repeatedly before Parliament, and here we are waiting again. Why is that? Is it because Mr. Ashcroft didn't like what he saw?